quite lift my prop up because it's quite heavy.
Hang on, I'm going to turn my. Oh, hello.
Who is that?
They'll have found the frickin' Daleks master plan by the time we start this.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I am ready to go.
We're just Tindering or whatever you were doing.
No, I'm putting it on the airplane mode. Right, I'm on the airplane mode. I'm done. I'm ready to go.
You sure?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Talking About Doctor Who. This is part 2 of 5 on series 3. 2 of 5 of 3. The magic fingers. Like us, subscribe to us, follow us, and write nice things below. I am Paul or P-Bal, and obviously, look, I'm talking quite slowly actually. I think it's because Jason wants to get away. Paul or P-Bal, and I'm joined by.
Hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason. And it is a little bit like a studio recording at the BBC here, because I think the lights will go out at 8 o'clock if I'm not done. So I'm kind of, don't really know.
For some of us, your lights went out a long time ago, Jason.
Yeah, some have said that, some have said it. Anyway,
previously on Doctor Who and the Talking About, we scored in reverse order. Galaxy 4, 13.5 points. Mission to the Unknown, 20.5. And the Mythmakers is our current leader on 21, which is also my playing age. All to play for because we've got a lot more stories to come here. This is just one story today. We're only doing one story today because it's that big and couldn't fit something this big into one. Anyway, Lee said, it is the Daleks master plan. Ooh. No, I don't have there's no such thing as the Daleks master plan hardback. And this is a bit of a backbreaker. I have got this though. Look at this.
Ooh, that's beautiful.
It's beautiful. It's expensive. Never been played.
Never been played.
Who plays Doctor Who on a bloody record player? Who does that? What I've done with that, I've got Peter Purves to sign it, and if someone breaks in, I will hit them with it because I think it could kill.
How many records is it?
You asked me to pick it up again. No, I've literally just put it down. It is a lot. Is it an episode aside plus the Mission to the Unknown? So it's like 7 vinyls.
Wow.
Well, this is an epic, isn't it? Let's be honest.
You can put it on the floor. It makes like a sort of jigsaw if you want to make a giant Doctor Who vinyl jigsaw for 100 quid. Hurrah! If anyone actually does listen to their Doctor Who vinyls and doesn't just buy them because they look incredibly pretty, I'd love to hear that because I only ever go, it's a lovely cover. I know I've got it on CD and I know I've got the reconstruction, but I really like that pretty cover. I must buy the vinyl. Anyway, who has an introduction for us to this story then?
Go on, Jason, have you got one?
No, I was going to leave because actually I can't let you not have the intro because you've really gone to town this week, haven't you?
Yeah, you're going to say that, but without my glasses on, I can't read it.
There may have been method in my madness.
Well, from what I can remember, what I wrote, this is an epic 12-parter that has more than a few surprises along the way. It's kind of like The Chase, but on steroids, because we have this epic story which kind of is broken into chunks, because we have the first part, which is like 6 episodes. Then we have like the Christmas interlude, and then we've got I know why you're laughing, Jason.
No, I just couldn't help myself.
And then we have the Christmas interlude, and then we come back to the story. And not only do we have the Daleks back, we pick up from where we left off with Mission to the Unknown. So we've got a continuation of that story, but we also have the monk who turns up in the sort of latter part of this story. after revenge for the Doctor from leaving him stranded in 1066. We have new TARDIS crew who don't fare too well in this particular story. So yeah, there's a hell of a lot going on.
The one thing that surprised me is it's 5 hours, and it's remarkably pacey if you think about it for a 12 episode epic. I mean, this is proper space opera, isn't it? Whichever way you cut this, you know, you've got dastardly plans in other galaxies. You know, you bring the attention back to Earth. You have some slapstick. You've got the monk. You've got all these various elements that all seem to bind together. And in typical Terry Nation fashion, for me, he manages again to pull the rabbit out of the hat to a degree, because he is drawing heavily on the chase. There's no question of that. And he's drawing heavily on his sort of Keys of Marinus type approach again, where he's trying to set the story in as many different locations as I think as he possibly can. And whilst he didn't write all 6, you know, he set the groundwork in the sort of early episodes. It has actually got a touch of class about it, this one. And you know, it's broken down. It's broken down into different component parts to a degree, if you like. So you've got the bits in the front, and then you have that sort of interesting distraction somewhere around the middle where we have to break for Christmas, which is again an amazing thing that they did there. And then it all gets into a sort of a different feel with the monk when the monk arrives at the end. So yeah, this keeps you on your toes, even at 12 episodes.
I think if it's a rabbit he's pulled out the hat, it might have myxomatosis. I think there's this for me. I think it loses the plot quite early on. The setup is that the Daleks are going to invade the galaxy. They've got an amazing weapon which can only be powered by the tranium. I mean, if you're going to design a kettle, make sure you've got electricity. I mean, make sure you've got something to run it on. So, I mean, that basically after the start setup and all that kind of, all the galaxies, you know, there's certain galaxies that are coming in on this, it then becomes, he's legged it with the tranium, let's give chase for weeks. It feels like that becomes a sort of runaround. And then for the last 2 weeks, it suddenly remembers actually it was back at the start and they were going to invade the galaxy. It feels like it's the exit for the runaround, and it takes them a heck of a long time to come back to the main plot. And I just feel that it is very much like, it is like the chase. It is basically the chase. And like you say, the Keys of Marinus, Uncle Terry's like, give them this, like, it wouldn't be, you know, the TARDIS, which isn't called that anymore, is back, isn't it? So you got the time traveling Daleks and all that sort of stuff. But it is quite obvious that the plot runs out early doors, and it's extended beyond its natural life, isn't it? And it's a shame, because I was like, epic, you know, you go epic, or more recently, I suppose, the Horrors of the Flux. People go epic, and it's an overarching storyline. But people seem to lose the skill of plotting it out, and this literally becomes a week by week chase sort of scenario until, you know, the end. At which point, I mean, 3 months on for a viewer, they've still been thinking, oh, the time, just the thing from the start with him. But I don't know. But it's probably an unkind thing, because in 1965, the 6-year-old kids were just like, it's a Dalek, hurrah, the Daleks are here every week.
We were at the height of, you know, the Dalek mania. They wanted more Dalek stories, and you're right. You actually got some scenes in this that were cut from the chase, that weren't made into the chase, but were made into this. So there was still more that Terry Nation wanted to add in. I think for me, the fact that he only does part of it, and you've got it's Dennis Spooner, isn't it, who does other stories, so it's not quite, here's a 12 episode of the chase, because they crossed over, they added in other elements. I think if I was back then, and the Daleks were reasonably new, having this 12-part Dalek story would have been quite exciting, would have been quite sort of like, oh, what's going to happen? I like the idea, again, that they reintroduced the monk as well, because I think that adds a little bit more to the end of it. Because I think you're right, P-Bal. If it had just been, apart from the Christmas episode, which you could almost take as a standalone, the rest of it is literally like, where's that? Where's the mineral gone? We need it. I mean, it always reminds me a little bit of in Goldfinger, where he's assembled all these different sort of people from around the world, all different businesses, because they've all made one component of this giant laser, and they've lost the most valuable piece. It's just like, oh, the Doctor's managed to literally just walk in, pretend to be someone, and walk out with it, and then we're into the chase. But I think there is more to it, and it takes darker turns as we go through. And I've always liked the Daleks when they are manipulative, when they are sneaky, when they are double-crossing people, and you get to see that quite a bit in this story.
Everyone's double-crossing everyone in this story.
Everybody is, yeah.
Let's be honest. Everyone's got some sort of plan. But I do wonder, going back to your point, P-Bal, I wonder on this one, because obviously it's clearly 12 episodes, and Terry wrote 6 and Dennis wrote the other 6. And it would have made a great 6-parter rather than it's being stretched out. And you're right, I think the audience is watching over 3 months. It's a little bit like, you think about, you go back to Mission to the Unknown, because there's been 4 weeks in between that and this, and you're picking up from that story. And we said when we reviewed Mission that must have been a little bit of a stretch for the audiences at the time watching weekly. But I do wonder if it had been a 6, or if you'd had Terry write the whole lot, or if you'd had Dennis write the whole lot, would you have come out with something that was just probably a little bit less formulaic, like a Chase or a Keys and Marinus?
I mean, Donald Tosh always told it that Terry didn't write very fleshed out scripts for this, and then went on holiday, said, sort it out yourself, lads. I mean, with the passing of time, that may or may not be quite the case. But what it sort of needs is almost what you have in Invasion of Time that we've obviously just done recently, is you kind of need that you have the first 4 episodes and it reaches maybe a point of that story concluding, and then into another. It maybe needs breaking into distinct proper stories that are akin to the one thing. Maybe it could have started with the space security people who can, and then at the end of the 4 parts you could reveal that Mavic Chan was not a good guy, he was a bad guy, and that could have led into the next part. And it feels very much from the start, Mavic Chan, who's meant to be the benevolent guardian of the solar system, it's straight away he is the bad guy. There's no sort of revelation to that. The audience know, the rest of the cast sort of know. I mean, apart from Sara Kingdom gets to kill off Brett Byman. It sort of, it doesn't feel like that is played out well enough. I think you could have done something quite clever with the Doctor getting involved, knowing that the Daleks are going to invade the galaxy, and trying to fix that and trying to defeat them, thinking that the Guardian was on his side, but the Guardian could have handed him over to the Daleks, and in the end, I just think, with the benefit of nearly 60 years of hindsight here, that probably would have been more satisfying, because I honestly think, and I feel a bit harsh saying, because I do enjoy it. It's an enjoyable sort of thing. I just think you have those sort of intense first few episodes where it's like the galaxy is going to be invaded, and then diddly run around for 6 weeks, and then it's back to and this is the conclusion of the story.
Yeah, there was, because they tried to do this thing where they were like, so Terry Nation wrote the first 5 parts and then left a cliffhanger at the end of part 5, and then said to Dennis, they were doing this thing where they were like trying to write cliffhangers for each other to work out how the other one was going to get out of it. Because there's a really good example at the end of episode 6 where the Doctor says, don't go outside, it's a toxic atmosphere, and actually they're in a English countryside police station, and it's the beginning of the Christmas episode, the Fish Stevens, he just goes, oh, did I say that? Oh, I didn't mean it. It's all fine, because they didn't quite know how to get past the cliffhanger from the previous writer. But they also were, I mean, they were going out while they were still writing and filming them. So, you know, they were such a quick turnaround that they were still halfway through when the episode started going out. And I do wonder whether, again, you know, looking at hindsight, whether or not there was a cohesive plan for the 12 episodes, whether, you know, they'd nailed down the entire story, or they were still making parts of it up, you know, as it was going out. Because for example, Sara Kingdom, I think in the original one, it was you know, when she killed Brett, it wasn't her brother, it was added in later on. It was sort of, you know, made into the storyline a bit further down the track. So there are some things where you think, well, actually, did they have that in mind when they first started writing it? Possibly not, because you've got these two writers working in tandem, but also separately. And like you say, Terry just went, here's a few scripts and that's it. So a lot of it was not made up on the spot, but was grafted as they went. And I think that might account for a little bit of that sort of incohesion, maybe in a few points.
But I think the turning point probably is the Christmas episode, I understand that actually, the Christmas Day, you probably didn't want something too dark or too hard to follow after you've had a bit of sherry trifle and all the rest of it. But it does sort of mark a bit of a turning, because I think the volcano episode, literally, they just land near a volcano, and the monk tries to bugger up their lock, which is fixed with a flash of Doctor Who's ring.
That is such a classic Get Out. The Doctor's special ring. Amazing.
He flashed his ring in the sunlight,
and it's like
immediately unlocked.
and I mean, even within the sort of the narrative, is like, how does that work? And it's like, oh, the special powers of the sun in this galaxy that help repair the lock.
Even Hartnell didn't like that, though, did he? He was just like, it makes no sense.
No, well, I mean, give it 40 years and he could have just done that and he'd have been fine. He'd have told them where they were, what was happening, the monk was on the hill, and all of it just from a wave of his sonic.
And it is interesting because the Daleks time machine sort of tips up halfway through this. It does turn it into the chase, essentially. And there's been no mention of it beforehand. And there doesn't really seem to be any good reason for it to be there. Or perhaps it should really have been there right from the very beginning. So it sort of backs up what you were saying about, I think they were literally making some of this up along as they went along. And I think Dennis was left holding the baby a little bit here, though, wasn't he? Terry under-delivered potentially on the promise, and 12 weeks of Daleks were what they promised. And at the time, for the kids, it goes back to what you said earlier, James. Anything with the Daleks in was a bit of a hit back in 1965. Still, the Daleks weren't on the wane. The popularity wasn't waning at that point. So, from my perspective, obviously, 12 weeks of the Daleks was a great hit for the BBC. And it comes down to Dennis Spooner. I think he was left holding it, and I think in some respects you get that nice bit at the beginning, as I said, you build the tension up, but it was left to Dennis Spooner to bring the conclusion. And I actually think the conclusion to this, by the time you get to the back end, if you were to take the first four and bolt the last two on, I think you'd have a pretty good six-parter there that would work really, really well. The ending is, I think, it sounds, I can't see it, but it certainly sounds like it was a pretty gruesome affair.
Yes. I think it's also worth noting that we talked about this in the last recording, and it was much more prevalent in this story as well, was Hartnell's ill health, but also his feeling about the show, because there were rumours that people downed tools, that they were unhappy with the way that he spoke to people. They were starting to write him out of scenes to give him less to do. So, as well as all the other things that we've talked about, you also had that complexity going on where they were trying to keep him as stable as possible and as happy as possible, whether that meant rewriting sections pretty much, on the spot. They were rehearsing during the week, filming on a Friday. They were having to make revisions so that Hartnell was happy with what he was doing and he wasn't in it too much, but at the same time he was getting unhappy because he felt other people were getting more than him. So there must have been, within the crew, within, on set, a level of tension, a level of, concern that they didn't want the whole thing to just come to a grinding halt. There were rumors that's the kind of thing that was threatened. But I guess that must have been a really difficult time as well, especially when you're looking at, this 12-part epic and you've got a main star who's not necessarily fully on board.
I mean, equally, and we did discuss this in the last video, in terms of Hartnell having a comfortable sort of family on the team. When Carol Ann went, Maureen was straight at. I mean, she's the week after, and then she's that. It's a run. It's complete. There's a really strange thing. You have Adrienne for 5 weeks, Jean for 9 weeks, something like that, 7 weeks, and then Annette Robertson, maybe you could say, for 4 weeks. And so it takes what, 4 months, real terms, and that's a long time before you get Jackie in as being a regular assistant. The problem being, I suppose, that John Wiles has got a bit of a fractious, but what's the relationship here? So there's nothing settled, and so he's got no. The hero in all of this, and I think the hero as we go forward and as we've had, is Peter Purves, who is so solid, and he carries this. He basically takes the William Russell sort of joint leading, and he sort of takes it a step further. He almost becomes the lead in this because William's not in a happy place, and I think it's a shame because there is so much of this that is missing. William Russell is almost an entire run, give or take a sort of dribble of Reign of Terror and The Crusader. You've got almost every single episode. You got Marco Polo, but Peter's run is absolutely desiccated. There's vast swathes of it. I mean, he's ending here where Katarina, he's like, Katarina died, and that's all gone, and that's a powerful scene. His next story is a really powerful story. Even his goodbye, you can only see in sort of flickery sort of season. So he's an actual, he's an actual Doctor Who hero, I think. But you can't, because you can't see it. I think it's sort of slightly buried until you look hard at it to see.
And it's a shame because I think it's meant that I think as a companion, Peter's character has been a bit underrated unnecessarily, I think, as we've gone forward, as time's progressed. I mean, obviously, I think, what we have got back and the episodes he's in that we can see, that he's playing a great role. And you're right, he's having to balance off against the lead actor who is aging, is getting a little bit more frail through ill health, and he does have to pick it up. And I think it's an understatement that we can't see. It's a shame we can't see more of, I think, what would be brilliance on screen.
I mean, the Katarina and the Jean Marsh's character, they really do get really brutally dispatched in this. I mean, she's sucked out into space. She's aged until she turns into dust. It's not, there's that moment at the end where Stephen's talking to the Doctor and just goes, all the people that we've lost, including Brett as well. It's quite, that ending is quite sort of stark compared to I know we're going to go on to other stories in this season, but up until now, that it's like we've lost 3 potential companions have been killed off in the course of this 12 episode epic. And
Jean Marsh's character of Sarah is really strong. And I think she really would have worked so well as the companion opposite Peter Purves in other stories to come. It's unfortunate because I don't think this is any fault of Adrienne's, but unfortunately, the Katarina companion or the Katarina episodes, because of placement of where she's been brought from and what she's presented with, it kind of works. But again, because we can't see it, it's difficult to know whether it's working fully. But I don't know. It just doesn't seem quite right for me.
I think the Katarina character is terrible. I think it's a really, really awful misfire. I don't think it's anything to do with her performance. I mean, she's literally working what she's given. There's a scene, strangely, because they had to cut for timing reasons and the Mythmakers, where Vicky talks to her and she says, "Oh yeah, I'm destined to die and this is my destiny." And they cut that. So her whole sort of raison d'etre that she was going into this situation knowing that she was going to be killed off was cut. But it's a really odd thing because it doesn't feel like she's added anything to it. It almost feels like they could have just left Troy, and if they'd have left Troy and Stephen was just sat in the chair feeling unwell, it wouldn't have made a lot of difference. There's almost a feeling as well that they go to the prison planet to pick someone up who can kill Katarina because they don't achieve anything else going there. We have to land and all that, but there isn't a feeling of. I think the walls are coming down. There isn't a feeling that actually the character has achieved anything or fits the narrative. It's a really odd thing. She just seems slightly out of it, and it's brutal. I mean, I don't feel any empathy particularly with it because I was just like, oh God, she doesn't, she's not great. She can go. But the brutality of how they kill her off. Yeah. I mean, they don't just. She's screaming and she's being actually assaulted. It's horrible. This is a children's TV show in 1965, folks. This is nasty stuff. And
you see her body floating in space. She's not even killed off screen or anything. You just suddenly you get they used trampolines, didn't they, to get the effect where she's just floating.
It's like Kylie and the forklift truck in Voyage of the Damned.
Yeah, unnecessarily brutal as well, though.
And yet that's the clip we only have because they thought that was worth putting into Blue Peter. So they were like, yeah, what clip should we use to illustrate this? Yeah, get her screaming. It's strange in a lot of ways. I mean, you only have to look at the child safety videos of the era, don't you? But I suppose it's a nasty way out for her, and it's the first sort of properly nasty. Everyone else has been married off or partnered off. Everyone's been loved out of the show, haven't they, previously?
Well, in love with the first man they met in their last episode.
Yeah, but this is the first time that anyone's been viciously assaulted and committed suicide to get away. It's sort of, yeah.
And not only do we get one, but we get two that die. And it's just, I think it's really, it's quite stark, isn't it?
Well, you get three if you include Brett, who's sort of like the, erstwhile companion as well, because he sort of joins them, who's murdered by his own sister.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing with Jean's an amazing actress. I love Jean. The Sara Kingdom character does have a sort of strange inconsistency throughout. There are a lot of episodes where she's written as the cold, hard agent, but then you get the odd episode where they write her as a bit sort of jokey with it, and it's I don't know. It's a very modern age thing, isn't it, to say the character consistency within the series or something. But I kind of think there are certain episodes where it feels like she's warmed, and then she goes back to being I don't think it's a character development. I think it's just an inconsistency with how they're writing it.
And I think maybe they had an eye on, could she potentially stay on afterwards? But ultimately, was the decision was made to kill her off, because she does, make it towards the end. It's only when she gets the full blast of the time destructor that she ends up aging horribly and turning to dust.
And again, we can't see it, but the loose cannon telesnap recon does give us a flavor of it, I suppose. That she visibly ages to death and to a skeleton, and the skeleton dust blows away in the wind. So you kind of that in itself is very brutal again.
I mean, it's also sort of one of those moot points. I know Adrienne and Jean both didn't really consider themselves companions. Jean was very adamant that she'd done 2 guest roles in Doctor Who, but she hadn't been a companion. And Adrienne said that, when she was asked to do companion reunions, she felt that she was a bit of a fraud because she wasn't really a companion. And it is that weird thing of how do you discern what is a companion? I mean, that's a debate to have below, folks. But it is interesting because if it's how they're reported in the press, you could say Imogen Bickford-Smith was a companion because she was, look who the new girl is with Doctor Who, Suzanne Daniel. If it's that they're travelling in the TARDIS, that would mean that Liz wasn't a companion because she didn't. But it would mean that, Kevin McNally in the Twin Dilemma is because he travels in the TARDIS. Is Kevin McNally's part in Twin Dilemma any more than Katarina's is hanging over from... It's a really weird... And if it's you've got to do 2 stories, then does that make Adam in the new series a proper companion because he did... I mean, we love to put these things into boxes, and Katarina and Sara have always been companions. They're always been listed as such. But it's an interesting thing because are they just guest stars or are they actually companions? I don't know. I mean, either of you could suggest what you think about that, or leave me hanging.
I mean, I
always thought that they were. I always thought they were listed as companions.
I think they have been listed as companions, but I agree. They travel with the Doctor in one story. To be a companion, potentially you have to travel in multiple stories in the TARDIS. No, it's that sort of they've traveled in the TARDIS and then we've compartmentalized it and made it that they were companions. I wouldn't put either of them down as a companion per se. Because they travelled in reality for one story.
But then where do you sit with the likes of Chameleon?
As far away from it as possible.
You'd never know who was sat near it because you've turned into someone that looked like someone else.
It's a tricky one, but I think because you've got something of this scale, if they'd broken it down into separate stories, so if you'd had like a 6-parter, a 1-parter, and then another sort of 5-parter, then it would be over multiple stories, essentially.
But it'd be one arcing story, wouldn't it? I suppose it's a bit like that tenuous kind of... I suppose the Trial Over Time Lord, they always say, is it's a 14-part story. But it's that kind of... Technically, it's a 14-part story, but it is 4 stories within that. Whereas this is basically the same narrative, isn't it? Doctor Who's stolen the tranium. They think they've got it. They've not got it. They've not got it. There's Doctor Who's stolen the tranium. It's that for quite a few weeks. Whereas Trial is distinctly set stories with a frame around it.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Brett stepped into the TARDIS. Does that make him a companion?
Preston steps into the TARDIS and Warriors of the Deep. Let's get that campaign going. I don't know. I mean, it is one of those things. I suppose doesn't make a lot of difference in the long run, I think. But it is an interesting debate as to what it is that steps out that made them into being companions, even if the ladies involved didn't necessarily think it was the case.
So the Christmas episode.
Well, isn't that just a thing? I really actually would love to see that proper episode because it looks like it was absolutely. It looks like it was absolutely crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, and regular viewers will know that I'm not a fan of telesnaps or reconstructions, and I have for this story watched all of them, including the really awfully animated Feast of Stephen, which took a lot of effort to get through. But the Feast of Stephen, it's just because originally they'd asked the cast of Z Cars to come in and do the Christmas special as a sort of like, crossover. I mean, the scale that they planned for this story, that got vetoed by the makers of Z Cars, who were like, no, we're serious cop drama. We're not having that. So you get this bit at the beginning where they end up in the police station, and then they go to Hollywood and all get mistaken for different, famous actors, actresses. And again, you'd like to think that the scale of that episode could have been amazing. Some sort of Hollywood set where they've got like Charlie Chaplin, etc. But when you look at in the context of the Daleks master plan, the rest of the story, it's like, what's that got to do with anything?
But it's almost sending itself up, though, isn't it? You get that scene in the police station where the guy has come in to complain about his greenhouse being moved, and we know that it's the same actor who was in the Crusades, but it gets actually referenced.
William Hartnell says,
Hartnell references the Jaffa, the market of Jaffa, and so I think they just decided here to have a bit of fun. The plot is briefly mentioned, but there are no Daleks, and I find that a surprising decision in the middle of a Dalek epic, as this is. I appreciate you, the general public watching Doctor Who on Christmas Day in 1965 might not have been expecting it, but you'd have thought they would have put the Daleks in there and they could have sent that up a little bit. Or did Terry Nation pull that idea potentially because he didn't want his creations being sent up as he was attempting to sell the rights to America at this stage?
I don't know, because he obviously had a bit of a joke with them in the chase, hadn't he? So I suppose they've done a little bit of humour there.
So it's unusual. I find it odd that they just didn't include them. It just does seem to stick out like a little bit like a sore thumb, but obviously deliberately so because of what it was done for.
I mean, it could be, like you get in Shakespearean dramas, you get that little light relief, don't you? You always get like a cutaway scene where something happens. So it could have been a little bit more around, okay, let's relieve the tension and do something slightly different. But you're right, it does seem to jar with everything else. It's like we're just going to put everything else on hold just for one episode while we, have a bit of a sideline to Christmas.
I suppose, is it not that different, I guess, than, I suppose, because Doctor Who was a continuing drama. Every week was a different title. Is it any different, I suppose, to the mission to them being into space, 4 weeks in Greece, 6 weeks of Daleks, a week of nonsense in a police station, then sort of, is it just that because Doctor Who was a weekly thing, rather than necessarily people sat there going, this is a 12-part story, then we're on to the 4-part story, is it because Doctor Who was something that you watched every week or you didn't watch every week? Does it jar less in that context because it was just Doctor Who that was on that week?
You're right, it probably does actually, because again, I'd forgotten that they reference New Year's in the following week's episode. So again, they've got the shots of London celebrating New Year, and you have that odd scene where the TARDIS lands in the middle of a cricket pitch. There are some really odd decisions that are taken in and around that sort of Christmas period. You're right, take them as standalone episodes, it isn't jarring.
Because isn't it the BBC like commentators talking about the cricket? Because they're talking about the cricket and then the TARDIS materializes, doesn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But for no reason, really.
Because doesn't it rematerialize? Doesn't it disappear again straight afterwards?
Yeah, it is very much it's very much a bit of a pad and a joke, which I guess with it's one of those things I suppose at the time would have been funnier within the context of your viewing than perhaps it is now. It's one of those things. Sometimes if you watch a sitcom or something, they'll make a joke about something. You think, oh, okay, well, in 1992 that would have been hilarious. Yeah. 2022, might not get the reference in the same
Yeah.
same way. I do think, as much as people always say it's a 12-part story and the Feast of Stevens, the silly one in the middle, that I think the week or so afterwards, it hasn't quite picked up the bat to being
serious.
dead serious. The cricket thing does go on slightly beyond its natural life, and then bless Peter Butterworth turns up for a comic thing, and it's strange because I do love the monk and I think he's a fun character, but I'm not quite sure if he's a little bit wasted in this, whether I would have happily seen another monk story. I mean, even down to the fact that they've gone to ancient Egypt for no really good reason within this, other than that they've got the Dalek time ship. And like, you could have done just a monk ancient Egypt story or something where he got his TARDIS was a pyramid or something. You could have done something quite fun as a separate story.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, what I love though is there is still that wonderful interplay between Hartnell and Butterworth, and the monk to me is better than most of the incarnations of the Master. But by the time you get past Delgado, you're pretty much like the Master is just trying to kill the Doctor. Whatever it is, I'm going to take over the universe and I'm going to kill the Doctor. With the monk, he's not really that bothered about killing the Doctor. There's a real sort of like gentlemanly agreement between them. He's like, you stranded me in 1066. I'm going to strand you here. There's no overly complicated plot or whatever else. The monk comes into the story having got away from 1066, trying to find the Doctor, trying to get revenge on him for leaving him stranded, and doing the same thing, and gets embroiled in the Dalek story. And I think you're right. I would love to have seen another standalone monk story where after this one they kind of had settled their their sort of argument, you trapped me, I trapped you, etc. And then there was another story that followed on afterwards, because I think it gives a really good injection into this story, because it's kind of like Daleks. Oh, the monk is in this one, and it's like, it's so nice to see him sort of pop up, and even on the telesnap reconstruction, I love the way they've done it. You just every so often the monk just appears from behind a rock. You just get Peter Butterworth appearing, and at one point he's wearing sunglasses as well. So it's a real comic character. It's not like as evil as the Daleks. He's not, he could just turn up and shoot the Doctor. He doesn't want that. He wants to exact revenge in the same way that he got trapped. He wants to trap the Doctor. Yeah, you've got the ring thing, which is just an easy way out. But I love the fact that the monk is in this story. That he pops up and he gets to interact with Daleks as well.
Jason looked like he was going to say something, and it all just went strangely still.
No, I would just add though, I think it is great to see Peter Butterworth back, and the monk is a great character, and I think the Time Medal is a great story, and it's clear that Dennis was drawing on some of what he'd obviously written earlier for the Time Meddler, but I don't know if Peter's performance in this is quite as on point as it was in the Time Meddler. Oh, again, is this just one of those times where, again, not I can see him in episode 10, and he seems to be fine, but I don't know, the character just doesn't seem to be at the very same level that he was in the Time Meddler.
The point of seeing things, I mean, we're quite lucky in a lot of ways because we've got 3 episodes and quite a few sort of clips from assorted parts of this. But it's interesting to think because for quite a few years we just had the 2 episodes, and then the second part was found. So actually, it's interesting because seeing the delegates, I mean, a lot of them sound great. They've gone to town and doing different voices, and I love all those sort of alien voices, but they look incredible, and it's such a a great space look, isn't it? They've got all their individual little races. I mean, you could keep Big Finish going for decades with the different outer galaxies, couldn't you? But that's interesting that having the episode back where you see them and you get to see their hands clamp and Mavic Chan's writing and all that all those sort of things are little visual things which enhance the enjoyment of this stuff. And you do battle against the fact that 75% of this is just guesswork on what you're sort of seeing. We haven't even got telesnaps. We literally do. We've got a handful of telesnaps, haven't we, from Beast of Stephen, because of Robert Jewell, but there is nothing else telesnap wise around for this, and it's a shame, really, because I think Douglas is such a visual director. I think there's a lot of stuff which might sound a bit tepid on audio that would probably look incredible visually. I mean, especially as we said before, the end scenes where Kemble turns to desert and Sara Kingdom becomes dust, and it's all horrible, but you're sort of making it up from camera script and the narration. You've not got anything visual, and I think seeing that and the Daleks crumbling and all that stuff, I think would be incredible and would probably elevate this, because you'd sort of forgive some of the padding that had gone before for the brutal ending.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I think we are. I think it's been interesting going back and rewatching this story again. One that I haven't watched for a long time, so it's been quite nice to revisit, albeit as a mixture of telesnaps and the odd bit of telecine and live episodes that we've got. But we are robbed. There's no question of it. That last episode would have played heavily to the horror that was playing out on screen. And I don't think there's many directors actually that probably could have undertaken a 12-week project quite as well as Douglas did with this one, I feel.
I mean, episode 5 is probably the first black and white Doctor Who I saw, because I was a little boy, first Doctor Who person I met, and he was lovely then, Peter Davison, and he presents Daleks the Early Years. So I had Daleks the Early Years on that sort of basis, because I hadn't had black and white Doctor Who. So the first black and white Doctor Who was episodes 5 and 10 of this, which were on the Daleks the Early Years tape. Strange, because they do feel like they're from completely separate stories, don't they? I mean, if you watch them in that context without any of the bridging or anything, they are completely different beasts. But yeah, it's interesting. That's probably my first route to black and white Doctor Who.
Yeah, but were those the two that were found in the Mormon church?
Yeah, so I don't know whether you were going to channel the Deborah Watling delivery then.
No, I'm channeling bad Wi-Fi this end, I think.
Because the one episode got lent out, didn't it, and never came back. So there's still the opportunity for there to be some of this out there, because it never got. Australia didn't want it, did they? Because of they decided they were going to have to cut so much out of it that there wasn't any point in actually doing it. But there wasn't there a set was made up for Australia.
Yeah, Australia was sent it.
But they decided they didn't want it.
Apparently didn't return it. They junked it. So that's I think the gist of that story.
Well, there are many stories, aren't there, on that call as to whether they did junk it or whether because they didn't pass the censors that they didn't then have to junk it because it was censored material that couldn't. It is a rabbit warren. The Daleks, even down to people often sort of say, but Feast of Stephen was never tele-recorded. Every Doctor Who story, every episode was tele-recorded. There was a copy made of every single one. Every single one. And you also had as broadcast recordings, which is how we have the trailer for Power of the Daleks.
I do like the fact that we've also got episode 2 back. So we had episodes 5 and episodes 10. You're right; they look like they're from 2 different stories. But the glimpse that episode 2 gives us, which is that sort of glimpse of Kemble and the Daleks burning the sort of forest, and we get to see the alien delegates. I think that's that in itself, as a standalone episode, it makes up for not having some of the other ones around it, because we can at least see some of that early. The story was quite strong in those sort of first few episodes, which we said kind of gives us that glimpse of the Delicates, because without that, we wouldn't really know what they were like, would we?
No.
I think James needs Sonia Marker to come and stick his spot back on, doesn't he?
I need a Sparky this side to come and turn the lights back on.
Do we have any exotic facts then on Doctor Who and the Daleks master plan?
Yeah, there is a few. So Dudley Simpson had fallen out with Douglas Camfield by this point, so didn't work on this one. We talked about the who was credited for which episode, but they, as I say, they tried to write cliffhangers for the other one to try and work out how they were going to get out of it. But it didn't work in the Christmas one, because they just literally just said, ignore what I just said at the end of the last episode. And there are disputes remaining over who wrote what, because, as you say, Terry Nation just went, here's my ideas, and left them to it. The scenes which are in Egypt and the invisible creatures, those are the ones that were originally cut from the chase. So he probably just brought his old notes and went, here you are. This is what I planned to do last time. So you can do those. In John Peel's novelization of this, of the Fist of Stephen, he uses the Z-Car actors' names for the policemen. So there is a crossover of sorts, but obviously didn't make it into the actual TV series. It was adapted into a charity play, which I didn't know about this. Nick Briggs did the voice of the Daleks, but they put it on stage for charity.
They did Evil and Web, I think, as well, didn't they?
Yeah.
Smith or something.
That's right.
But it was episode 4, which was the Traitors, is the one that went missing once they lent it to Blue Peter and it never came back. Yeah. We talked about Reg Pritchard, who's in the Christmas one, and the Doctor says, "How didn't I see you in Jaffa?"
He didn't say anything like that to Sara Kingdom, because he hooked up with her in Jaffa as well, didn't he?
And the weird thing is, Katarina's death scene was the first thing she filmed. So they filmed that before they filmed the Mythmakers, which I think is really weird. You go on to a show and they actually film your death sequence before they actually film the actual episode.
She knew she was going, didn't she? I mean, literally,
she knew it was only for a short period of time.
Because she's only in episode 4 of the Mythmaker, so the pre-film for Dalek's Master Plan was before.
Yeah. So they did. They filmed her death on a trampoline, so her floating in space was slowed down jumping on a trampoline. But then they used the same trampoline for when Peter Purves and Jean Marsh were dematerialized. You know, that weird sequence where they're
go to Myra.
Yeah. So they used the same trampoline to do the effect for that.
And Mr. Hartnell doesn't go on the trampoline; he just does that a bit, doesn't he? He's
like, no, there's no trampoline there for Billy, that's for sure.
Mr. Hartnell will not be using the trampoline, but he will do some angst faces for you.
Yes. There's a couple of. There is a really sassy Dalek in this story who says you make incompetence sound like an achievement, which I think is a really. So really, the shade from the Daleks. That'll be the next story. Shade of the Daleks. And it also has the wonderful line of "It came from Uranus." I know it did. So there we go.
Well, there's a note to end on.
Pure our humour there.
I'm sort of speechless on the horrors of all that. Okay. I mean, we should. I mean, before we use Kevin Stoney, I think is a very strong sort of. So again, the character is sort of isn't always the strongest character all the way through. He becomes a bit ciphery, but Kevin's a great performer, I think, throughout. Although they just basically decide that he goes mad, don't they, at the end. It's not sure it's an entirely satisfactory end for Mavic Chan. They say he's gone mad and he wanders into the corridor so they can shoot him. It's a bit of if only there'd been a bit more of a confrontation, I think, on him saying, I want the time, and they said no. And yeah, I don't know. To my taste, it feels a bit of a cop-out that he just goes a bit crazy and, Anyway.
No, I'd agree with that. He so subtly underplays the villain piece in the beginning, and it gets a little bit OTT when he sort of goes a little bit mad in that last episode. Like you said, it's just a bit of it's a non-starter really for his death, isn't it? Which after 12 weeks is not the payoff you're looking for.
But I will write the scores down using this special method.
Oh no, that is definitely the way to hold the pen. It was like that or something, wasn't it?
It's just your middle one out, isn't it? I think so. You can almost like chopsticks, but not really.
No, and I'm useless at chopsticks anyway. So
right, delegates. That was me hitting the desk, which might not have sounded any good.
That's what Jason does to get the camera back to him.
Oh. Says James.
I tell you what, I think it'd be a couple of delegates that would happily stab each other in the back here. I'm not just putting it out there. Do we have scores on the doors for Doctor Who and the 12-part Dalek story, as it could have been called?
12 parts, 3 stories. What would you like to take it as?
You can't give it 12 points because it's 12 episodes.
No, and that doesn't help my scoring. No, I think I know where I am with this one. So 12 weeks of Daleks, or 12 weeks minus 1, because you don't get them at Christmas.
So 11.
11 weeks of Daleks.
And then a week with Mission to the Unknown, so it's back up to 12.
There you go. We've got 12 weeks of Daleks. And I think it sets out to do what it sets out to do. It sets out to give the 1965 viewer 12 weeks of Daleks to help with Dalek Mania. It's not the worst story I've ever watched. And I think it's got some real high points. It's got lots of gruesome elements as well, with the deaths of Katarina and Sara. And obviously Brett as well. But I think, even though Hartnell isn't taking the main stage role in this, I still think, from what I can see of those episodes and from what I can hear on the audios, he does seem to be on pretty good form throughout this one, although he does take a sneaky holiday in episode 11, so he doesn't quite make it all the way to the end without a break either. You're right, Peter Purves is stunning throughout this one, and he does step up and take the lead. And I actually wanted Sara Kingdom as a companion, because for me, that I think she would have been terrific in some of the future stories. She might have helped to lift our next story a little bit more.
How would Sara Kingdom have fitted into the Massacre of St Bartholomew's Eve? I'm not sure that would have sat well, would it?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. She would have. I don't know. She might have. I don't know. She might have. It was well. We don't know because we can't see that one either. But we'll talk about that next week. I love the episode 7. Actually, there are people that really don't like the thought of putting that in the middle of it. I think that's an ingenious idea to stick a slapstick, send Doctor Who up kind of episode in the middle of it all. But you know, it was Christmas and it was the right thing to do. On the whole, pretty good, pretty strong story, and I'm going to be giving Daleks Master Plan a solid 7.
Solid 7.
It's the build-up, isn't it? You're on tenterhooks as to where he's going to go. He could say 4 at the end of all of that. You never know with Jason.
Because he's a contrary Mary, folks. That's what he is.
All right, my turn then. So as I said, I don't do telesnaps or reconstructions or anything else like that. So often when I come into these missing episodes, it's difficult to make a judgment. You know, I sometimes will listen to the audio. I'll go on what I've read, and this is the first story where actually I started watching the telesnaps and I wanted to watch the whole thing. And I think for me, I've come to this with quite a fresh pair of eyes, because I've previously only really sort of read about it and read synopses of it rather than read the novel. So I actually really liked this story, and I thought that yes, it did. Particularly the first 6 episodes, there was that little bit of a drag, but I actually didn't mind that too much. And then the Christmas episode, as you were just saying, Jason, it doesn't necessarily fit within the narrative of the whole story. But if you think about what we do now, well, what we've done previously with Doctor Who since it came back in 2005, you've had these standalone Christmas episodes which have been a bit hit and miss, not necessarily taken too seriously, loosely based on something. So actually, that concept of having this one-off Christmas special to make it easier for the viewers who might be just tuning in for one episode and not the rest of them, I think is a smart move. I also thought it was a smart move bringing the monk back to sort of mix it up a little bit, break it up a little bit. Otherwise, you've got just a continuation of the trace for 11 weeks. I think also the idea of killing off 3 potential companions in this story is also a bold move, and one which I don't know whether audiences were shocked when they first saw that. I think the death of Jean Marsh's character would certainly have been quite a shocking end, but actually, Katarina's being sucked out into space, sacrificing herself to save the Doctor, having only really just met him, I think would have also been quite shocking. All being told, I gave this score 10. I genuinely loved this. So there we go. As I say, it's the first time I've sat through a telesnap, because normally even the really horrible crayon drawing of one of the episodes, I persevered because I actually quite enjoyed it, and I did it over several nights. I think if I sat and done it as a binge watch like I do other programs, I probably wouldn't have felt the same. But I did it over a period of sort of 5 nights, a couple of episodes a night, and I thought it was brilliant.
Wow, didn't see a 10 coming. Wow.
There we go.
I think what the kids say now is that I'm shook. Shook. The one thing I didn't mention that I quite like is there's a couple of bits when they are in the early episodes. I like this. Philip Anthony and Pamela Greer have a bit where they're sort of the telecom people. Pamela Greer, wife of John Carson. Mm-hmm. And there's also a bit of a talk about identifying people and saying, we've got a database which has got everybody's visual recognized. And of course, in 1965, that was space age. Now, that's just the norm, isn't it? It's incredible. So yeah, that's all quite by the by. But I'm enjoying that bit. Yeah, I like it. I think I like the earlier bits a lot more than I like the sort of second semester of it, and the end I think is all right. I'm not sure whether it's wholeheartedly resolving 3 months of epic adventure. So yeah, I think it's a good story. I think again, this is one that there's a few episodes especially I think we would enjoy a lot more if we could see them. It's not underrepresented. There are a lot more in the season I think are worse off, but I concurred with Jason. I gave this a 7.
Oh, well, that's very that's unusual for us to score on the same there.
No, I didn't even add or deduct half just to sort of differentiate.
Oh dear Lord. I feel that my Wi-Fi is making this a little bit like a telesnap reconstruction all in itself, this episode.
It's all right. We're getting all the golden nuggets that we could possibly want from you. Although you haven't said whether you like the script. Did you like the script for this one?
I thought I'd avoid talking about the script this week.
You avoided talking about the script for all the other ones you said you like the script on, mister. Don't try that one.
Well, all I can say about this is the script was written by 2 writers. And I'm not entirely sure that one of the writers did an awful lot of work on it in the first place. But there you go. That's my mention of the scripts this week.
And I'm sure the viewer will be much sated by that.
They will. I'm sure they will. Viewer, I hope that's good for you.
Anyway, that has been part 2 of 5 of 3. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
A pleasure as always.
Yes.
you ain't getting no camera back there, boy. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and write nice things below. James will speak to you live. Well,
yes.
I won't, because do you know what? This will be going out literally tonight. If I look younger here, it's because when we recorded this, I was still 39. I'll be 40 by the time it goes out. It will have descended in the night.
Wow.
I will all of a sudden, I'll be like Sara Kingdom. I'll be like, there'll be a gust and I'll be gone. The time destructor will take. Anyway, enough of that nonsense. See you soon, folks.